Hello and welcome to our radio drama presentation of the Clue movie. Please note that this is a live performance and the cast has had no rehearsals together. Some actors may have practiced their lines, some are doing this as a cold read, so there may be occasional stumbles in the dialogue. We're expecting to have a lot of fun and hope you will too. Without further ado, Clue. Exterior, a car, twilight. The year is 1954. Our setting, New England. We see a sky becoming stormy. A car travels through the wind of an oncoming storm. It pulls up to the gate of Hill House, a large imposing mansion. The driver takes out a key, unlocks the gate, and proceeds up the driveway. Exterior, Hill House, front door. The driver, a thin man in a tuxedo, exits the car holding a bag and looking at the two barking guard dogs. The dogs approach him, then jump at him, but are held back by the sturdy chains attached to their collars. He quickly pulls a big beef bone out of the bag and hurls it to them. The dogs trot away to gnaw on the bone as he rolls up the bag. The man ties their chain so it won't allow them to reach the door. He steps toward the door and sniffs the air. He pauses and checks the bottom of his feet. Dog crap. He looks in disgust at the dogs, who aren't bothered at all. Ground floor, the hall. The hall of Hill House is remarkable, elegant but not gaudy. It is furnished in dark wood and brass with crystal chandeliers. There are several doors on each side of the hall and 3 at the end. To the left, lounge and dining room. To the right, study, library, and billiard room. To the end, conservatory, ballroom, bathroom, and kitchen. The stairs are located to the right. By the staircase is the door to the basement steps. We hear shake, rattle, and roll in the background. The man opens the front door of Hill House and wipes off his foot before entering and hanging up his coat. The man steps briskly down the hall steps toward the library. Ground floor, library. The library is a somewhat more comfortable room than the hall, composed of dark colors. A young and rather jiggly French maid is polishing a glass as she listens to the record player that can be heard from the entrance. The man enters and turns off the record player. The music stops.
Is everything ready?
Oui, monsieur.
You have your instructions?
They nod at each other and the man exits. The maid sniffs the air and examines the bottom of her shoes. Ground floor, kitchen. The kitchen is white tile, narrow. There is a meat freezer to the right and a counter to the left. A female cook is sharpening a knife. Joseph McCarthy is speaking on the television in the background. The man enters.
Is everything all right, Mrs. Ho?
The cook turns as her name is called, knife in hand.
Dinner will be ready at 7:30.
The doorbell rings and the man exits the kitchen. Ground floor, the hall. The man who is already in the house opens the door. Another man is standing outside, being growled at by the dogs. He is not comfortable.
Good evening.
Good evening. I don't know if...
Yes, indeed, sir, you are expected, Colonel. May I take your coat? It is Colonel Mustard, isn't it?
No, that's not my name. My name is Colonel...
Pardon me, sir, but tonight you may well feel obliged to my employer for the use of an alias.
Mustard sniffs around and checks his shoe as Wadsworth hangs his coat. The pair starts across the hall.
And who are you, sir?
I'm Wadsworth, sir, the butler.
Ground floor, library. The maid is present.
Yvette, you will attend to the Colonel and give him anything he requires. Within reason, that is.
Wadsworth exits, closing the doors behind him. The doors have bookshelves on the back of them, making the door blend in with the wall.
Oh, Wadsworth, I was...
Mustard turns to discover the doors have disappeared. The doorbell rings again. Ground floor, the hall. Wadsworth opens the door to see a woman dressed in black.
Do come in, madam. You are expected.
Do you know who I am?
Only that you are to be known as Mrs. White.
It is said so in the letter, but why?
Wadsworth removes her coat, which is revealed to have a brilliantly white inside. Mrs. White sniffs and checks her shoe. Ground floor, library. Mustard is sipping cognac and glancing at Yvette as the doors open.
Ah, may I introduce you? Mrs. White, this is Yvette, the maid.
The two women react with disgust.
I see you know each other.
Mrs. White turns away as Colonel Mustard emerges from behind the door.
Hello.
Hello.
Exterior, roadside. A woman is standing by her broken-down car. She hits the car, obviously frustrated, but then sees headlights approaching. She smooths her dress. As the other car nears, she bends over the engine and lifts a leg. Spicy. The car screeches to a halt just past her and backs up. A voice calls out to her.
Want a lift?
Yes, please.
Interior, man's call.
Thanks. I'm late for a dinner date.
Me too. Where are you going?
Let's see. Hill House, off Route 41.
Wait a minute. Let me look at that. That's where I'm going. I got a letter like this.
They both look disturbed as it begins to rain. Ground floor, library. We see a middle-aged woman accompanied by Wadsworth.
And this is Mrs. Peacock.
How do you do?
Hello.
Yvette, will you go and check that dinner will be ready as soon as all the guests have arrived?
Yvette nods and exits the library just as the doorbell rings. Exterior, Hill House, front door. It is now raining quite hard. A man is standing at the door, much like Colonel Mustard was. The dogs, of course, are growling. Wadsworth opens the door.
Is this the right address to meet Mr. Body?
Oh, you must be Mr. Green.
Yes.
Sit!
Green frantically sits on a bench by the door.
No, not you, sir.
Green sheepishly gets up and enters the house. Alternating shots of man's car and exterior Hill House.
It should be just off there.
That must be it.
Lightning crashes, illuminating the house.
Why is the car stopped?
It's frightened.
The car is started again and rolls up the driveway. There's a light burning in the window. Exterior, Hill House, front, driveway. The man and woman exit their car and run for the front door.
What a godforsaken place.
He squeezes one of the woman's buttocks, also spicy. She shakes his hand off, looking disgusted as the door opens, revealing Wadsworth.
Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet. I didn't realize you were acquainted.
We weren't.
They enter. Ground floor, library. The doors open to reveal Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet.
May I present Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet?
Nods all around. The newest guests receive wine glasses from Yvette, whom Plum eyes. Professor Plum clinks glasses with Miss Scarlet, who looks annoyed.
Of course, since you've each been addressed by a pseudonym, you'll have realized that nobody here is being addressed by their real name.
The guests glance around suspiciously. Their glances are interrupted by Mrs. Ho fiercely and repeatedly banging a gong out in the hall.
Yeah!
Mr. Green jumps at the sound, dumping his champagne on Mrs. Peacock.
Ah, dinner.
Mr. Green hands Peacock his glass, starts to mop her up.
I'm sorry. I'm a little accident prone.
Ground floor, dining room. The guests cross to the dining room. It is elegant, in similar decor to the hall, but more comfortable. At one end there is a door and a metal partition, both leading to the kitchen. The guests file in.
You'll find your names beside your places. Please, be seated.
The guests find their places and sit, with the exception of Colonel Mustard, who notes the place sitting at the head of the table.
Is this place for you?
Oh, indeed no, sir. I'm merely a humble butler.
And what exactly do you do?
I buttle, sir.
Which means what?
The butler is the head of the kitchen and dining room. I keep everything tidy, that's all.
Colonel Mustard attempts to continue, but is interrupted by Mrs. Peacock.
Well, what's all this about, Butler? This dinner party?
Ours is not to reason why, ours is but to do and die.
Die?
Merely quoting, sir, from Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Colonel Mustard sits next to Miss Scarlet.
I prefer Kipling myself. The female of the species is more deadly than the male. You like Kipling, Miss Scarlet?
Sure, I'll eat anything.
Yvette enters, carrying a tray.
Shark's fin soup, madame.
Colonel Mustard points to the head of the table again.
So is this for our hosts?
No, sir. For the seventh guest, Mr. Body.
I thought Mr. Body was our host.
The guests all concur.
Yeah.
So, who is our host, Mr. Wadsworth?
Wadsworth chuckles and with a closed smile.
Well, I want to start while it's still hot.
Oh, now shouldn't we wait for the other guest?
I will keep something warm for you.
What did you have in mind, dear?
A very loud silence. Professor Plum slurps loudly soup from his spoon. Mrs. White disapproves, then does the same. Mustard, Scarlet, and Green stare at them, spoons poised near mouths. They slip again. More loud silence.
Well, someone's got to break the ice, and it might as well be me. I mean, I'm used to being a host. It's part of my husband's work, and it's always difficult when a group of new friends meet together for the first time to get acquainted. So I'm perfectly prepared to get the ball rolling. I mean, I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, what I'm doing here, what this place is about, but I'm determined to enjoy myself, and I'm very intrigued. And oh my, this soup's delicious, isn't it?
Everyone sits, bewildered.
You say you're used to being a hostess as part of your husband's work?
Yes, it's an integral part of your life when you're the wife of a... Oh, but then I forgot we're not supposed to say who we really are. Though heavens to Betsy, I don't know why.
Don't you?
I know who you are.
Aren't you going to tell us?
How do you know who I am?
Well, I work in Washington, too.
Oh, so you're a politician's wife.
Yes, I am.
Well, come on then. Who's your husband?
Suddenly, Wadsworth opens the door from the kitchen.
So, Mrs. White, what does your husband do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Well, he just lies around on his back all day.
Sounds like hard work to me.
Yvette in the kitchen opens the partition suddenly. The noise coincides with the crash of thunder. Mr. Green, jumpy as ever, spills his drink again, this time on Miss Scarlet.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I'm a little accident prone.
He starts to wipe off her lap.
Watch it.
He stops. Yvette starts serving food.
Excusez-moi.
The guests start eating.
This is one of my favorite recipes.
I know, madam.
So what do you do in Washington, D.C., Mr. Green?
No answer.
Come on, what do you do? I mean, how we get acquainted if we don't have anything about ourselves?
Perhaps he doesn't want to get acquainted with you.
Well, I'm sure I don't know. But if I wasn't trying to keep the conversation going, then we would just be sitting here in an embarrassed silence.
Are you afraid of silence, Mrs. Peacock?
Yes? What? No, why?
It just seems to me that you are. You seem to suffer from what we call pressure of speech.
We? Who's we? Are you a shrink?
I do know a little bit about psychological medicine, yes.
Are you a doctor?
I am, but I don't practice.
Practice makes perfect. I think most men need a little practice. Don't you, Mrs. Peacock?
Mrs. Peacock shrugs, very uncomfortable.
So, what do you do, Professor?
I work for UNO, the United Nations organization.
Another politician. Jesus.
No, I work for a branch of UNO, WHO, the World Health Organization.
Well, what is your area of special concern?
Family planning. What about you, Colonel? Are you a real colonel?
I am, sir.
You're not going to mention the coincidence that you also live in Washington, D.C.?
How do you know that? Have we met before?
I've certainly seen you before, although you may not have seen me.
So, Miss Scarlet, does that mean that you live in Washington too?
Sure do.
Does anyone here not live in Washington, D.C.?
I don't.
Yes, but you work for the United Nations. Well, that's a government job. And the rest of us all live in a government town. Anyone here not earn their living from the government in one way or another?
Colonel Mustard stands suddenly.
Wadsworth, where's our host, and why have we been brought here?
The doorbell rings. Wadsworth exits. We hear the door opening, and Wadsworth speaks.
Ah, good evening. You are eagerly awaited.
You locking me in? I'll take the key.
Over my dead body, sir. May I take your bag?
No, I'll leave it till I need it.
It contains evidence, I presume?
Surprises, my friend. That's what it contains. Surprises.
Wadsworth enters the dining room, followed by the final guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. Body?
What are they all doing here?
Eating dinner, sir. Do sit down, Mr. Body.
Thanks.
Yvette starts to serve him.
No, you can take that away, honey.
Mrs. Peacock hits the table.
Look, I demand to know what's going on here. Now, why have we all been dragged up to this horrible place?
Well, I believe we all received a letter. My letter says, it will be to your advantage to be present on this date because a Mr. Body will bring to an end a certain long-standing, confidential, and painful financial liability. It is signed, a friend.
I received a similar letter.
So did we, didn't we, Professor Plum?
I also received a letter.
Yvette starts to serve him again.
No thanks, Yvette. I just ate.
Now, how do you know her name?
We know each other.
Mr. Body puts his hand up Yvette's short skirt.
Don't we, dear?
She recoils, decidedly unspicy.
Forgive my curiosity, Mr. Body, but did your letter say something similar?
No.
I see. Can I interest any of you in fruit or dessert?
No response.
In that case, may I suggest we adjourn to the study for coffee and brandy, at which point I believe our unknown host will reveal his intentions.
Ground floor, the study. The study is by far the most comfortable room we've seen so far. It is decorated in subdued tan colors, with several couches, a bookshelf, a table with drinks, and a desk. The guests enter and look around for their host.
Well, there's no one here.
Please help yourself to brandy and be seated.
Wadsworth goes to the desk and takes a manila envelope. It reads, For Wadsworth, open after dinner.
Mind if I smoke?
Professor Plum, seated next to Miss Scarlet, lights her cigarette. Wadsworth opens the envelope and peruses the contents.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm instructed to explain to you what you all have in common with each other. Unless you would care to do the honors, Mr. Body.
Why me? They know who I am?
I don't think so. You've never identified yourself to them, I believe.
Mr. Body stands suddenly.
It's a hoax. I suggest we all leave.
He takes off out the study door. Wadsworth immediately pursues him.
I'm sorry, sir. You cannot leave this house.
Ground floor, the hall. Mr. Body goes to the front door. Wadsworth follows, and he is followed by the other guests.
No? Who's gonna stop me?
There's no way out.
Mr. Body tries the front door. It's locked.
All the windows have bars. All the doors are locked.
This is an outrage. You can't hold us prisoner.
The guests, in confusion, agree.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to the study. Everything will be explained.
The guests file unhappily back into the study. Mr. Body walks past Wadsworth toward the rear of the hall.
You too, Mr. Body.
Body starts running.
Nope.
Other way.
He pursues Mr. Body. Ground floor, conservatory. The conservatory is humid, with plants all around. 3 of the walls are brick, and the 4th is glass, leading to the outside. The rain can be heard and seen against the glass. Mr. Body runs in, picks up a brick, and prepares to throw it through the glass. Wadsworth enters.
You can't get out that way.
Why not? It's only glass.
Suddenly, a vicious Doberman jumps at the glass, barking and snarling. Body drops the brick, and Wadsworth smirks triumphantly. Ground floor, study. The guests are already present. Wadsworth and Mr. Body return, and Wadsworth takes up the envelope again.
Ladies and gentlemen, you all have one thing in common. You're all being blackmailed. For some considerable time, all of you have been paying what you can afford, and in some cases more than you can afford, to someone who threatens to expose you. None of you know who's blackmailing you, though, do you?
Oh, please. I've never heard anything so ridiculous. I mean, nobody could blackmail me. My life is an open book. I've never done anything wrong.
Anybody else wish to deny it?
The guests look at each other, but no one responds.
Very well. As everyone here is in the same boat, there's no harm in me revealing some details, and my instructions are to do so. Thank you, Yvette.
The maid, so dismissed, leaves.
Don't you think you might spare us this humiliation?
I'm sorry. Professor Plum, you were once a professor of psychiatry specializing in paranoid and homicidal lunatics suffering from delusions of grandeur.
Yes, but now I work for the United Nations.
So your work has not changed. But you don't practice medicine at the UN. His license to practice has been lifted, correct?
Why? What did he do?
You know what doctors aren't allowed to do with their lady patients?
Yeah.
Well, he did.
Oh, how disgusting.
Are you making moral judgments, Miss Peacock? How, then, do you justify taking bribes in return for delivering your husband, Senator Peacock's vote to certain lobbyists?
Why, I never. My husband is a paid consultant. There's nothing wrong with that.
Not if it's publicly declared, perhaps. But if the payment is delivered by slipping used greenbacks in a plain envelope under the door of the men's room, how would you describe that transaction?
I'd say it stinks.
Well, how would you know? When were you in that man's room?
So it's true.
No, it's a vicious lie.
I'm sure we're all glad to hear that, but you've been paying blackmail for over a year now to keep that story out of the papers.
Well, I'm willing to believe you, Miss Peacock. I'm being blackmailed for something I didn't do.
Me too.
And me.
Not me.
You're not being blackmailed?
Oh, I'm being blackmailed, all right. But I did what I'm being blackmailed for.
What did you do?
Well, to be perfectly frank, I run a specialized hotel and a telephone service which provide gentlemen with the company of a young lady for a short while.
Oh, yeah? What's the phone number?
Miss Scarlet rolls her eyes.
So, how did you know Colonel Mustard works in Washington? Is he one of your clients?
Certainly not.
I was asking Miss Scarlet.
Well, Miss Scarlet, you tell him it's not true.
It's not true.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
Ha! So it is true.
A double negative.
Double negative? You mean you have photographs?
That sounds like a confession to me. In fact, the double negative has led to proof positive. I'm afraid you gave yourself away.
Are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests?
You don't need any help from me, sir.
That's right.
Mustard realizes what he just said.
But seriously, I don't see what's so terrible about Colonel Mustard visiting a house of ill fame.
Professor Plum puts his hand on Scarlet's leg.
Most soldiers do, don't they?
Oh, please.
But he holds a sensitive security post in the Pentagon. And, Colonel, you drive a very expensive car for someone who lives on a colonel's pay.
I don't. I came into money during the war when I lost my mommy and daddy.
Mrs. White, you've been paying our friend the blackmailer ever since your husband died under, shall we say, mysterious circumstances.
Miss Scarlet laughs.
Why is that funny?
I see. That's why he was lying on his back in his coffin.
I didn't kill him.
And why were you paying the blackmailer?
I don't want a scandal, do I? We had a very humiliating public confrontation. He was deranged. He was lunatic. He didn't actually seem to like me very much. He had threatened to kill me in public.
Why would he want to kill you in public?
I think she meant he threatened in public to kill her.
Oh, and was that his final word on the matter?
Being killed is pretty final, wouldn't you say?
And yet he was the one who died, not you, Mrs. White, not you.
What did he do for a living?
He was a scientist, nuclear physics.
What was he like?
He was always a rather stupidly optimistic man. I mean, I'm afraid it came as a great shock to him when he died. But he was found dead at home. His head had been cut off, and so had his, you know.
The men in the room cross their legs.
I had been out all evening at the movies.
Do you miss him?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
But he was your second husband. Your first husband also disappeared.
But that was his job. He was an illusionist.
But he never reappeared.
He wasn't a very good illusionist.
Mr. Green clears his throat and stands.
I have something to say. I'm not going to wait for Wadsworth here to unmask me. I work for the State Department, and I am a homosexual. I feel no personal shame or guilt about this, but I must keep it a secret, or I will lose my job on security grounds. Thank you.
Mr. Green sits back down to Professor Plum, who rapidly stands and walks away.
Well, that just leaves Mr. Buddy.
What's your little secret?
His secret? Oh, hadn't you guessed? He's the one who's blackmailing all of you.
Lightning crashes. Mr. Buddy grins with satisfaction.
You bastard!
The guests advance on Mr. Buddy as he stands. Colonel Mustard raises his fists, ready to fight.
Put him up!
Mr. Buddy steps on the Colonel's toes and pokes him in the eyes.
Gentlemen!
If you can't fight fairly, don't fight at all!
Calls me a bastard.
Mr. Green and the others try to separate them as Colonel Mustard recovers and Mr. Buddy goes for him. Mrs. White decides to take matters into her own hands and knees Mr. Buddy in the crotch.
Was that necessary, Mrs. White?
Wait, the police are coming. Listen, blackmail depends on secrecy. You've all admitted how he's been able to blackmail you. All you have to do is tell the police. He'll be convicted and your troubles will be over.
It's not so easy. You'll never tell the police.
Then I shall. I have evidence in my possession, and this conversation is being tape recorded.
Ground floor, billiard room. Yvette in the billiard room, drinking cognac and listening to an active tape recorder. Mr. Green's voice can be heard through the recording stereo.
Point of order, tape recordings are not admissible evidence.
Ground floor, the study. General confusion ensues.
Ladies and gentlemen, the police will be here in about 45 minutes. Tell them the truth, and Mr. Buddy will be behind bars.
Mr. Buddy goes for the hall, but Wadsworth stops him.
Where are you going this time?
I think I can help them make up their minds. Can I just get a little bag from the hall?
Mr. Buddy exits and quickly returns with his bag, which he opens.
Who can guess what's in here, eh?
The evidence against us, no doubt.
Mr. Buddy chuckles and starts handing out boxes, each with a different size and shape.
We didn't know we were meeting you tonight. Did you know you were meeting us?
Oh, yes.
What were you told precisely?
Merely that you were all meeting to discuss our little financial arrangements. And if I did not appear, Wadsworth would be informing the police about it all. Naturally, I could hardly resist putting up an appearance.
He finishes handing out the packages.
Open them.
Why not? I enjoy getting presents from strange men.
Scarlet opens her package, a candlestick.
A candlestick? What's this for?
Mrs. White opens her box and reveals a rope, tied in a noose. Mr. Green takes his box in one hand, opens it, and lets the contents fall into his other hand, a bent lead pipe. Colonel Mustard opens his box and pulls out a heavy wrench. Professor Plum... Professor Plum takes the lid off his package and looks in. He gingerly pulls out a revolver. Finally, Mrs. Peacock is seen holding a dagger.
In your hands, you each have a lethal weapon. If you denounce me to the police, you will also be exposed and humiliated. I'll see to that in court. But if one of you kills Wadsworth now, no one but the 7 of us will ever know. He has the key to the front door, which he said would only be opened over his dead body. I suggest we take him up on that offer.
Mr. Body goes over to the light switch with deliberate ease. He closes the door to the hall and sets his drink down.
The only way to avoid finding yourselves on the front pages is for one of you to kill Wadsworth. Now.
He turns off the lights. We hear noises. Someone inhales rapidly. A gunshot. Something ceramic shatters. A scream. Lights go up. Mrs. Peacock, who turned on the light, drops the dagger in shock. Mr. Body is lying prone on the floor.
It's not Wadsworth.
Stand back. Give him air. Let me see. He's dead.
Who had the gun?
I did.
Then you shot him.
I didn't.
Well, you had the gun. If you didn't shoot him, who did?
Mr. Body is turned over.
Nobody. Look, there's no gunshot wound. Somebody tried to take the gun from me in the dark, and the gun went off. Look, the bullet broke the vase on the mantel.
Everyone rushes for the mantel simultaneously, causing confusion.
He's absolutely right. Look, there's a bullet hole here in the wall. See that?
Mr. Green grabs Professor Plum by the lapels.
How did he die?
I don't know. I'm not a forensic expert.
Well, one of us must have killed him.
Well, I didn't do it.
Oh, I need a drink. Ooh, me too, girl.
Mrs. Peacock goes to the door and gets Mr. Body's cognac. She sips.
Maybe he was poisoned.
Mrs. Peacock drops the glass in revulsion and starts to scream. She won't stop. Mr. Green takes her to a sofa, offering words of comfort.
It's all right. It's okay.
She sits, but won't stop screaming.
It's okay.
Mr. Green slaps her.
I had to stop her from screaming.
Was the brandy poisoned?
I don't know.
Miss Scarlet picks up the glass. All the cognac is spilled out.
Looks like we'll never know.
Unless she dies too.
They all rush over to scrutinize Mrs. Peacock. A scream erupts from another room. The guests gasp and run from the study into the hall. Ground floor, the hall. The guests run to the door of the billiard room. Mr. Green tries it.
It's locked.
Open up.
It must be the murderer.
Why would he scream?
He must have a victim in there. Oh my God, Yvette!
Oh my God!
Door is open. Ground floor, billiard room. The guests pour in.
You're alive.
No thanks to you.
What do you mean?
You locked me up with a murderer, you idiot.
So the murderer is in this room.
My oui.
But where?
Where? Here.
Mr. Green looks behind the door.
We are all looking at him. Or is what Mrs. White said in the study. One of you is the killer.
How do you know we said that?
I was listening.
But why were you screaming in here all by yourself?
Because I am frightened. Me too. I also drink the cognac. Mon Dieu, I can't stay in here by myself.
Miss Scarlet and Colonel Mustard go to Yvette.
Come back to the study with us.
With the murderer?
There is safety in numbers.
Mustard realizes he's still brandishing his wrench and lowers it.
My dear.
The guests leave the room. After they are gone, Wadsworth takes the tape off the spools. Ground floor, the study.
Is there no indication of how he died?
No.
This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. Oh, it's not what I intended. Oh my God.
Not what you intended.
So you're not the butler?
I'm not the butler, but I am a butler. In fact, I was his butler.
So if he told you all to invite us all to his house, why did he arrive late?
I invited you. In fact, I wrote the letters. It was all my idea.
Wait a minute. I don't understand. Why did you invite us here to meet your late employer? Were you assisting him to blackmail us?
Certainly not.
I think you had better explain.
Please sit down, everyone.
Everyone sits but Mr. Green. He searches for a spot, but no one gives it to him. He ends up leaning against a serving table.
When I said that I was Mr. Body's butler, this was both true and misleading. I was once his butler, but it was not his untimely death this evening that brought my employment with him to an end.
When did it come to an end?
When my wife decided to end her life. She too was being blackmailed by this odious man who now lies dead before us. He hated my wife for the same reason he hated all of you. He believed that you were all thoroughly un-American.
Mr. Green's serving table gives way, landing him and several pieces of crystal on the floor.
Sorry.
For some reason, he felt that it was inappropriate for a senator to have a corrupt wife, for a doctor to take advantage of his patients, for a wife to emasculate her husband and so forth.
But this is ridiculous. If he was such a patriotic American, why didn't he just report us to the authorities?
He decided to put his information to good use and make a little money out of it. What could be more American than that?
And what was your role in all of this?
I was a victim too. At least my wife was. She had friends who were socialists.
Oh my God.
Well, we all make mistakes.
Mrs. White pulls a tissue from her bra and gives it to him.
But Mr. Body threatened to give my wife's name to the House Un-American Activities Committee unless she named them. She refused, and so he blackmailed her. We had no money, and the price of his silence was that we worked for him for nothing. We were slaves. Well, to make a long story short...
Too late.
The suicide of my wife preyed on my mind and created a sense of injustice in me. I resolved to put Mr. Body behind bars. It seemed the best way to do it, and free all of you from the same burden of blackmail was to get everyone face to face, confront Mr. Body with his crimes, and then turn him over to the police.
So, everything's explained.
Nothing's explained. We still don't know who killed him.
Well, the point is we've got to find out in the next 39 minutes before the police arrive.
My God, we can't have them come here now.
But how can we possibly find out which of you did it?
What do you mean, which of you did it?
Well, I didn't do it.
Well, one of us did. We all had the opportunity. We all had a motive.
Great. We'll all go to the chair.
Maybe it wasn't one of us.
Oh, who else could it have been?
Who else is in the house?
Only the cook.
Only the cook.
The cook!
Ground floor, kitchen. The party runs from the study to the kitchen. They all get stuck in the door, except for Mr. Green. He steps down into the kitchen and looks around.
Well, she's not here.
The door to the freezer starts to open. Miss Scarlet screams.
Ah!
The cook's body tumbles out into Mr. Green's arms. She now has the dagger sticking out of her back. Mrs. Ho was not, and is not, a light woman. He is having difficulty holding her.
I didn't do it! Somebody help me, please. Somebody help me, please!
Several guests go to help. Mrs. White reaches for the knife.
Don't touch it. That's evidence.
Not for us. We have to find out who did this. We can't take fingerprints.
I think you better explain yourself, Wadsworth.
Me? Why me?
Who would want to kill the cook?
Dinner wasn't that bad.
How can you make jokes at a time like this?
It's my defense mechanism.
Some defense. If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Oh?
I said if. If. Hey, come on. There is only one admitted killer here. It is certainly not me. It is her.
He points at Mrs. White.
I've admitted to nothing.
Well, you paid the blackmail. How many husbands have you had?
Mine or the other woman's?
Yours.
5.
5?
Yes, just the 5. Husbands should be like Kleenex. Soft, strong, and disposable.
You lure men to their deaths like a spider with flies.
Flies are where men are the most vulnerable.
Right.
Again, he realizes what he just said.
Well, if it wasn't you, who was it then? Who had the dagger anyway? It was you, Mrs. Peacock, wasn't it?
Well, yes, but I put it down.
Where?
In the study.
When?
I don't know. Before I fainted, after I fainted, I don't know. But any of you could have picked it up.
Look, I suggest we take the cook's body into the study.
Why?
I'm the butler. I like to keep the kitchen tidy.
Ground floor, the study. The men are carrying the cook's body into the study, effectively blocking off the woman's view. As they enter, Professor Plum drops the part of the body he's carrying and points into the room.
Look!
What?
The body's gone.
Mrs. Ho is dropped.
What are you all staring at?
Nothing.
Well, who's there?
Nobody.
What do you mean?
Nobody. No body. That's what we mean. Mr. Body, his body, it's gone.
Maybe he wasn't dead.
He was.
We should have made sure.
And how? By cutting his head off, I suppose?
That wasn't called for.
Where is he?
We'd better look for him.
They look around, but find nothing.
Well, he couldn't have been dead.
He was, at least I thought he was. But what difference does it make now?
It makes quite a difference to him. Maybe there is life after death.
Life after death is as improbable as sex after marriage.
Or maybe Mr. Body killed the cook.
Yes.
Yes.
How?
I don't know.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I have to, Yvette, is there a little girl's room in the hall?
Oui, madame.
No, I just want to go powder my nose, thank you.
Yvette is bewildered. Mrs. Peacock steps over Mrs. Ho's corpse into the hall. Miss Scarlet picks up the manila envelope that Wadsworth had earlier and pulls something out of it.
What's this, Wadsworth?
I'm afraid those are the negatives to which Colonel Mustard earlier referred.
Colonel Mustard rushes over to them.
Oh my god!
Were you planning to blackmail him, Wadsworth?
Certainly not. I'd obtained them for the Colonel and was going to give them back as soon as Mr. Body was unmasked.
Very pretty. Would you like to see these, Yvette? They might shock you.
No, merci. I'm a lady.
Oh, how do you know what kind of pictures they are if you're such a lady?
What sort of pictures are they?
They are my pictures, and I'd like them back, please.
No, I'm afraid there's something in them that concerns me, too.
Professor Plum snatches the pictures and holds them up to the light. Mrs. White looks along with him.
Let me see.
Oh my. Nobody can get into that position.
I'm sure they can. Let me show.
Plum starts to lower Mrs. White onto the couch.
Get off me!
Ground floor, the hall, rear. Mrs. Peacock opens the door to the bathroom. She screams. Mr. Body's body falls out and lands in her outstretched arms. He is almost certainly dead now. His head is bloody. The party runs out to help her. They see Mrs. Peacock backing up. Mr. Body's corpse slumped against her.
Mr. Body!
He's attacking her!
They pull the corpse off Miss Peacock.
Well, he's dead.
Mr. Body, dead again.
Oh, heaven above, oh my God.
She's going to faint.
Somebody catch her!
Wadsworth moves behind Mrs. Peacock, encircling her with his arms, but not touching her.
I'll catch you. Fall into my arms.
Mrs. Peacock falls, sliding through the lack of grip that Wadsworth has provided.
Ooh, sorry.
Mr. Green, you've got blood on your hands.
Mr. Green looks at his hands. He had been gripping the shoulder of Mr. Body's blood-stained coat moments earlier.
I didn't do it!
He's got new injuries.
Wadsworth picks up Mr. Body's arm and lets it fall again.
Well, he's certainly dead now. Why would anyone want to kill him twice?
It seems so unnecessary.
It's what we call overkill.
It's what we call psychotic.
Unless he wasn't dead before.
What's the difference?
That's what we're trying to find out. We're trying to find out who killed him and where and with what.
There's no need to shout.
I'm not shouting. All right? I am. I'm shouting.
At which point the candlestick, which had been nestled above the bathroom door, falls and hits him on the head. Wadsworth hits the floor.
Ooh.
Ground floor, the study. Mrs. Peacock has recovered. The women are taking the heavier Mrs. Ho into the room. The men have the lighter Mr. Body.
Okay, put the corpses on the sofa. Ladies first.
They plop Mrs. Ho on the sofa. Wadsworth enters, holding ice to his head.
Ugh, careful. Don't get blood on the sofa.
How do we do this? The dagger will go further into the back.
Tip her forward, over the arm.
They do so.
Now, Mr. Body.
They place him on the other side of the couch. Professor Plum is stuck on the couch between the two corpses. Rather than move, he decides to make himself comfortable.
Now, who?
Colonel Mustard notices Mr. Body's still open eyes staring up at him. He closes them.
Who had access to the candlestick?
All of us.
It was given to you, Miss Scarlet.
Yeah, but I dropped it on the table. Anyone could have picked it up. You, him.
Wadsworth starts going around the room, picking up the weapons.
Look, we still have all these weapons. The gun, the rope, the wrench, the lead pipe. Let's put them all in the cupboard and lock it. There's a homicidal maniac about.
He locks the weapons in the cupboard. Everyone states their approval.
What are you doing with the key?
Putting it in my pocket.
Why?
Well, to keep it safe, obviously.
That means you can open it whenever you want.
but it also means that you can't.
But what if you're the murderer?
I'm not.
But what if you are?
Well, it's got to be put somewhere. If I've got it, I know I'm safe.
We don't know that we are.
I've got an idea. We'll throw it away.
Good idea.
Good idea.
Ground floor, the hall, foyer. Wadsworth opens the door and raises his arm, preparing to throw the key. Waiting outside the door is a man who ducks, thinking Wadsworth is about to hit him. The butler quickly recovers and pockets the key. The rest of the party runs up behind him.
Ooh, sorry. Sorry. Can we help?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb the whole household, but my car broke down out here, and I was wondering if I could use your phone.
Just a moment, please.
The party huddles together and discusses it. The motorist looks confused. After a time, the group turns to the motorist.
Very well, sir. Would you care to come in?
Well, where is it?
What, the body?
The phone. What body?
Well, there's nobody. There's nobody. There's nobody in the study.
No!
Oh,
But I think there's a phone in the lounge.
Thank you.
Ground floor, the lounge. Wadsworth leads the motorist inside and indicates the phone.
When you finish your call, perhaps you'd be good enough to wait here.
It is not a question.
Certainly.
Wadsworth exits the lounge. Ground floor, the hall. Wadsworth closes the door to the lounge and locks it. Colonel Mustard comes up behind him and puts a hand on his shoulder as he's pocketing the key. Wadsworth
Ugh.
yells in fright.
Where's the key?
In my pocket.
Not that key, the key to the cupboard with the weapons.
Do you still wish me to throw it away?
Yes!
Exterior, Hill House, front. Wadsworth takes the key from his pocket and throws it. You see it land on the cement and bounce into the foliage. Ground floor, the hall. Wadsworth closes the door.
Well, what now?
Wadsworth, let me out.
No.
Why not?
We've got to know who did it. We're all in this together now.
if you leave, I'll say that you killed them both.
General agreement among the guests. Mrs. White grabs Wadsworth by his tie.
Oh, Wadsworth, I'll make you sorry you've ever started this one day when we're alone together.
Mrs. White, no man in his right mind would be alone together with you.
Well, I could use a drink.
General agreement again. Colonel Mustard goes to the study and looks in.
Just checking.
Everything all right?
Yup, 2 corpses, everything's fine.
Ground floor, library. Colonel Mustard is pouring himself a tall glass of whiskey.
Anybody else want a whiskey?
Yeah.
Colonel Mustard fills 3 other glasses at once, spilling the drink over the table.
All right, look, pay attention, everybody. Wadsworth, am I right in thinking there's nobody else in this house?
No.
Then there is someone else in this house.
No, sorry, I meant no meaning yes.
No meaning yes? Look, I want a straight answer. Is there someone else or isn't there, yes or no?
No.
No there is or no there isn't?
Yes.
Mrs. White breaks her glass against the fireplace.
Please! Don't you think we should get a man out of the house before he finds out what's been going on here?
She tosses the remains of her glass into the air. It shatters on the hearth.
Yeah.
How can we throw him outside in this weather?
If we let him stay in the house, he may get suspicious.
If we throw him out, he may get even more suspicious.
If I were him, I'd be suspicious already.
Oh, who cares? That guy doesn't matter. Let him stay locked up for another half an hour. The police will be here by then, and then there are 2 dead bodies in the study.
Well, there is some confusion as to whether or not there's anybody else in this house.
I told you there isn't.
There isn't any confusion or there isn't anybody else.
Either. Or both.
Just give me a clear answer.
Certainly. What was the question?
Is there anybody else in the house?
No!
That's what he says. But does he know? I suggest we handle this in proper military fashion. We split up and search the house.
Split up?
Yes, we have very little time left, so we'll split up into pairs.
Pairs?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Suppose that one of us is the murderer. If we split up into pairs, whichever one of us is left with the killer might get killed.
Then we would have discovered who the murderer is.
But the other half of the pair would be dead.
This is war, Peacock. Casualties are inevitable. You cannot make an omelet without breaking eggs. Every cook will tell you that.
Oh, but then look what happened to the cook.
Colonel, are you willing to take that chance?
What choice have we?
None.
I suppose you're right.
Bon decor, but it is dark upstairs, and I am frightened of the dark. Will anyone go with me?
I will.
I will.
No, thank you.
I suggest we all draw lots for partners.
He takes long matchsticks from near the fireplace. Ground floor, kitchen. Wadsworth is using a knife to cut the long matchsticks into different lengths. He prepares them in his hand so the matches' lengths can't be seen.
Ready? The two shortest together. The next two shortest together. Agreed? And I suggest that the two shortest search the cellar, and so on up.
The guests approach the butler, pick their matches, and begin comparing. Colonel Mustard's and Miss Scarlet's match, putting them on the ground floor. Miss Scarlet looks disgusted. Mrs. White and Wadsworth are paired for the second floor. Professor Plum walks by Yvette and a distraught Mr. Green, who are going to the attic together. Plum matches cellar sticks with Miss Peacock.
It's you and me, honey bunch.
Oh, God.
Ground floor, the hall. We see the party as it splits up. Wadsworth and Mrs. White start up the stairs, as do Mr. Green and Yvette. Professor Plum and Mrs. Peacock stop, unsure of where to go. Wadsworth pauses on a step and indicates the door under the staircase.
The cellar.
Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet stop in the middle of the hall.
Well, we know what's in the study. We've just come from the library, and the stranger's locked up in the lounge.
Let's go look in the billiard room again.
Miss Scarlet and Colonel Mustard go to the billiard room, while Professor Plum and Mrs. Peacock cautiously enter the cellar. Second floor, hallway. A storm is still around Hill House, visible from a second-story window. Wadsworth and Mrs. White walk down the hallway as Mr. Green and Yvette start climbing the stairs to the attic.
Do you want to go up in front of me?
Absolutely no.
I'm sure there's no one up there.
Then you go in front.
All right.
Neither move. Cellar, staircase. Darkness. We barely see Mrs. Peacock and Professor Plum backlit at the top of the stairs.
Well, ladies first.
No, sugar, you can go first.
No, I insist.
No, I insist.
Well, what are you afraid of? A fate worse than death?
No, just death. Isn't that enough?
Second floor, hallway. Mrs. White and Wadsworth are at the doors of two adjacent rooms, looking at each other nervously.
Are you going in there?
Yes, are you?
Yes.
They pause, staring at each other awkwardly.
Right.
Right.
I don't see any light switches in there.
Well, neither do I, but there must be switches somewhere.
Shall I come with you?
No, I mean, no thank you.
They start into their rooms and then jump out simultaneously, checking for the other. Ground floor, billiard room. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet are now behind the corner bar. Colonel Mustard indicates the bar's narrow egress.
Ladies first.
No thanks.
They both head for the exit and squeeze through. It's a very tight fit. Colonel Mustard walks past Miss Scarlet, who is sure to keep him in sight. He grabs a pool cue from the wall. She gasps and raises her hands defensively. Colonel Mustard unthreateningly walks over to the pool table and motions with the stick to look under it. They do. There's nothing there. Attic. Mr. Green and Yvette are still where they were, at the bottom of the steps.
Go on. I'll be right behind you.
That's why I'm nervous.
Then we go together.
The two squeeze up the narrow steps. Cellar. Mrs. Peacock and Professor Plum are still inching down the steps. Mrs. Peacock turns on the lights, and as Professor Plum slips on a step. This frightened Mrs. Peacock, who runs down the remaining few steps.
Stay there!
Ground floor, the hall, foyer. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet throw open the closet door. Nothing there. Second floor, master bedroom. Wadsworth is wandering in the dark.
If there's anybody in here, just look out.
Second floor, bedroom. Mrs. White is wandering like Wadsworth.
Are you hiding? I'm coming.
Ground floor, ballroom. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet are backlit. We see the hall behind them.
What room's this?
Search me.
All right.
Oblivious to her figure of speech, he starts to frisk her.
Get your mitts off me.
He does. Cellar. Mrs. Peacock sees a rat and screams. The rat crawls away. Professor Plum tenses, but starts to look around. Ground floor, ballroom. Colonel Mustard flips on the lights, making Miss Scarlet gasp.
Nobody here.
He's behind one of those curtains?
She points to the curtain at the far end of the ballroom.
You look. I'll go search the kitchen.
Colonel Mustard leaves. Miss Scarlet sighs and starts to walk, slowly, towards the curtains. The curtains almost seem to be moving. Then there is definite movement off to the right. She continues cautiously. Scarlet reaches the curtains, pauses, and throws them back, revealing a broken window with wind blowing in. Exterior, roadside. It is still raining. We see the motorist's car on the side of the road. A cop car pulls up to investigate. Ground floor, the study. We see papers and photographs. A picture of Mr. Body glaring suspiciously through a car window. A wartime Colonel Mustard standing outside of a car beside another uniformed man. Mr. Green exiting a building, carrying a briefcase. One of the female guests standing outside a building, looking around cautiously, a bag in her hand. Film negatives, more papers, and the reels with the taped conversation from earlier are placed on top of the heap. A gloved hand picks everything up and throws the photos and papers into the fire. Then the tape goes in. It all burns. The hand now uses a key to unlock the cupboard with the weapons. But wasn't that key thrown away? The weapons are revealed. Exterior, motorist's car. A cop is shining his flashlight into the car, attempting to investigate through the closed window. Ground floor, the lounge. The motorist is making his phone call.
I'm a little nervous.
Behind him, the lounge's fireplace is swiveling around.
I'm in this big house, and I've been locked into the lounge. Yes.
The next statements are intercut with the gloved hand holding the wrench, approaching the motorist.
The funny thing is, there's a whole group of people here having some sort of party. And one of them is my old boss from...
The wrench descends. The phone falls to the floor, and then the motorist follows suit. A gloved hand places the phone back on its cradle. Exterior, roadside. The cop shines his flashlight on the car's license plate, then underneath the car. Finding nothing, he walks away. Ground floor, conservatory. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet stand in the doorway, backlit by the hall. Colonel Mustard switches on the lights, and the two look around. The conservatory is dilapidated. There is dust and cobwebs all around. It obviously hasn't been used for some time. Miss Scarlet walks to the outer wall of windows. Colonel Mustard walks to one side and picks up something. He then takes a rag and wipes his hand off. While doing so, he leans against the wall, and it swings open. He falls down, but quickly gets up.
Looks like a secret passage.
Should we see where it leads?
What the hell? I'll go first. I've had a good life.
Ground floor, conservatory, lounge, secret passage. The secret passage is narrow and the floor is uneven. Miss Scarlet trips and yells in surprise.
Oh, God.
It's all right.
Ground floor, the lounge. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet emerge from behind the still rotated fireplace. They see the motorist's corpse.
Oh, my God.
The fireplace slides shut behind them. Scarlet panics. She starts yelling.
Oh, let me out!
She and Mustard run to the double doors. They're locked. Now both are yelling.
Ah!
Attic. Mr. Green and Yvette faintly hear Miss Scarlet's yells and run down from the attic. Second floor. Wadsworth and Mrs. White run for the staircase just as Green and Yvette descend and head in the same direction. The four collide and clumsily untangle themselves while the screaming continues below them. Wadsworth and Mr. Green run down the stairs, followed by Yvette and Mrs. White.
Where's it coming from?
Where are we going?
They make it to the ground floor just as Professor Plum and Miss Peacock emerge from the cellar.
Where are they?
The lounge.
Door's locked.
I know. I know that the door's locked.
Unlock it.
Where's the key?
Wadsworth searches his pockets.
The key is gone.
Don't mind about the key. Unlock the door.
I can't unlock the door without the key.
Green bangs on the door.
Let us in! Let us in!
Let us out! Let us out!
Out!
It's no good. Stand back. There's no alternative. I'm just going to have to break it down.
The butler runs at full speed for the door. He hits it and falls to the floor, holding his shoulder. Yvette gets an idea.
I know. I have it.
Yvette runs towards the study. The two in the lounge are still yelling.
Will you both shut up? We are doing our best.
Yvette enters the study and grabs the revolver from the open cupboard. She runs out of the study and trips over the still sprawled Wadsworth, accidentally firing the revolver. The shot goes wild and hits the rope suspending a chandelier above them. Mr. Green and Professor Plum hit the deck. The chandelier starts spinning. Mrs. Peacock and Mrs. White run into each other. Mustard and Scarlet are crouched down.
They're shooting at us!
The chandelier continues to spin. The rope is fraying. Yvette stands and aims at the lounge lock and fires twice. Both shots hit the door lock. Inside the lounge, Colonel Mustard turns away from the door, holding his shoulder.
I've been shot! I've been shot!
Come out. The door is open.
She lowers the gun, so so it is carelessly pointed in the direction of Professor Plum and Mr. Green. They scramble out of the way. Trigger discipline, people. The lounge door opens, and a miraculously unwounded Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet emerge.
Why are you shooting that thing at us?
To get you out.
You know, you could have killed us. I could have been killed.
The chandelier is spinning increasingly quickly. The rope is almost completely frayed.
I can't take any more scares.
The rope snaps. The chandelier lands 3 feet in back of Colonel Mustard. In shock, he slumps onto a bench in the hall. Miss Scarlet points into the lounge.
But look!
The party runs across the room to the motorist's corpse, crushing glass as they go.
Which one of you did it?
We found him together.
How did you get in?
The door was locked.
It was a great trick.
There's a secret passageway from the conservatory.
Yvette, is that the same gun?
From the cupboard?
But it was locked.
No, it was unlocked.
Unlocked?
But yes, see for yourself.
The party runs into the lounge. On the way, Yvette tosses the revolver under the broken chandelier. Ground floor, the study. The guests pile in and see that the cupboard has indeed been opened.
How did you know it was unlocked? How did you know that you could get at the gun?
I didn't. I think I would break it open, but it was open already.
A likely story.
The doorbell rings. The guests freeze in place.
Maybe they'll just go away.
Silence. The guests look relieved. The doorbell rings again. The guests look disappointed.
I'm going to open it.
Why?
I have nothing to hide. I didn't do it. Wadsworth, the key.
Wadsworth hands the key to Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Mr. Green strides into the hall, followed by the rest of the party. Ground hall. The hall. Foyer. Mr. Green opens the door, revealing the cop.
Good evening, sir.
The door closes in the cop's face. Less than a second later, the door reopens.
Yes?
I found an abandoned car down near the gates of the house. Did the driver come in here for any help by any chance?
Everyone
No.
but Mr. Green. This was not the case.
No.
No.
No, it's unknown.
Well, actually, yes.
No.
No.
There seems to be some kind of disagreement.
No.
Yes.
Can I come in and use your phone?
Of course you may, sir. You may use the one in the, no. You could use the one in the, no. Would you be kind enough to wait in the library?
Sure.
Ground floor, the hall. The cop sees Yvette.
Don't I know you from someplace?
The maid shrugs.
You all seem to be very anxious about something.
It's the chandelier. It fell down, almost killed us. Would you like to come this way, please, sir?
Miss Scarlet closes the door to the study suddenly and attempts to look nonchalant. The cop whirls at the sound. Professor Plum does the same to the lounge door. The cop whirls again.
Frightfully drafty, these old houses.
Ground floor, library. Wadsworth leads the cop in and indicates the phone.
Please, help yourself to a drink if you'd like.
The cop reaches for the cognac.
Not the cognac, just in case.
The butler exits and closes the door.
Just in case of what?
Ground floor, the hall. Wadsworth locks the door and turns to the assembled guests.
Now what?
The cop tries the door handle. It is, of course, locked.
We should have told him.
Oh, very well for you to say that now.
I said it then.
Shut up.
Wadsworth points to the shattered chandelier.
Let's clean this up.
Ground floor, library and hall. In the library, the cop walks over to the phone and reaches for it, but it rings before he picks it up. He answers the phone.
Hello?
In the hall, everyone stands still. They heard the phone ring.
Maybe the cop answered it.
In the library, the cop is still on the phone.
And who shall I say is calling? Will you hold on, please?
The cop places the phone on the desk and strides over to the library doors.
Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to shut me in. I'll book you for false arrest, wrongful imprisonment, and obstructing an officer in the course of his duty, and murder.
The door opens. The party stands there, Wadsworth with broom in hand.
What do you mean, murder?
I just said it so you'd open the door.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
What's going on around here? And why would you lock me in? And why are you receiving phone call from J. Edgar Hoover?
J. Edgar Hoover?
That's right. The head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Why is J. Edgar Hoover on your phone?
I don't know.
I don't
He's on
know.
everyone else's. Why shouldn't he be on mine? Excuse me.
Wadsworth enters the library, then closes and locks the door.
What's going on in here?
Miss Scarlet drapes herself on the cop.
We're having a party.
Mind if I look around?
Sure. You can show him around, Mr. Green.
Me?
Yes, you can show him the dining room, the kitchen, the ballroom.
Fine. Officer, come with me. I'll show you the dining room, or the kitchen, or the ballroom.
Ground floor, dining room. The cop raises the metal partition and looks into the kitchen. Ground floor, lounge. The party stands by the couch. Both corpses are still there. Miss Scarlet is addressing the others as she picks up a bottle of alcohol.
Make it look convincing.
Ground floor, dining room.
So, this is the dining room.
No kidding.
Ground floor, lounge. Miss Scarlet takes Professor Plum by the wrist and starts pulling him into the hall.
Come on.
Ground floor, dining room.
What's going on in those two rooms?
Which two rooms?
The cop pushes past him and moves toward the door. Miss Scarlet and Professor Plum run frantically across the hall and enter the study just as the cop enters and points at the lounge in the study.
Those two rooms.
Oh, those two rooms.
Yes.
The cop strides toward the study door, but Mr. Green blocks the cop's path.
Officer, I don't think you should go in there.
Why not?
The cop dodges around Mr. Green. The guest blocks the door to the study with his body.
Because it's all too shocking.
The cop throws Mr. Green aside. Ground floor, the study. Music can be heard in the background. It's Life Could Be a Dream on a record player. Mrs. White is on the couch on top of Mr. Body, using her hand to move his arm against her and pretending to kiss him. The cop sees Colonel Mustard and a woman apparently kissing against a fall wall in a curtain. We see that Mrs. Peacock is behind the curtain, her hands on Colonel Mustard's back, Mrs. Ho propped up between them.
It's not all that shocking. These folks are just having a good time.
The cop leaves for the hall. Mr. Green is surprised. Ground floor, the lounge. The motorist is propped up in a chair. Miss Scarlet pours the alcohol she took into the motorist's mouth and then puts the bottle in his hand. Ground floor, the study. Colonel Mustard and Mrs. Peacock roll Mrs. Ho onto the couch. Ground floor, the lounge. Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet climb onto the couch and begin to kiss. The cop comes in.
Excuse me.
The two lovers get up with a start. The cop notices the motorist. He leads into the dead man's face and sniffs.
This man's drunk. Dead drunk.
Dead right.
The cop turns to the motorist again.
You're not going to drive home, are you?
He won't be driving home, officer. I promise you that.
Yeah.
Someone will give him a lift, huh?
Oh, we'll get him a car.
A long black car.
A limousine.
Ground floor, the hall. Wadsworth exits the library and sighs. The cop and Mr. Green enter the hall. Wadsworth throws off his exhaustion and walks to them with a smile.
Officer.
You're too late. I've seen it all.
All during this conversation, Mr. Green is standing behind the cop, looking at Wadsworth. Green looks mystified but relieved.
You have? I can explain everything.
Oh, you don't have to.
I don't?
Wadsworth glances from the cop to Mr. Green, who is forcing a smile and shaking his head from side to side.
Don't worry. There's nothing illegal about any of this.
Are you sure?
Of course. It's America.
I see.
It's a free country. Don't you know that?
I didn't know it was that free.
The cop glances back at Mr. Green, who tries to look innocent.
May I use your phone now?
Certainly.
The butler leads the cop to the library once again and locks it. The guests start to emerge into the hall.
Why did you lock him in again?
We haven't finished searching the house yet.
Well, we're running out of time. Only 15 minutes before the police come.
The police already came.
Shut up!
Let's get on with it.
The guests again split up to search the house as the music continues. Ground floor, kitchen. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet enter. Colonel Mustard opens a cupboard, only to have an ironing board hit him in the head. Miss Scarlet opens the door to the freezer. She grasps one of the meat hooks. It turns in her grip and reveals another secret passage in the back of the freezer.
Oh, look, I can't believe it. I wonder where this one goes.
Well, let's find out.
They step in. Ground floor, the study. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet swing aside a large painting and enter the room from the secret passage. They shrug.
Let's try the ballroom again.
Attic. Mr. Green and Yvette are still poking around in the attic. Unknown area. A gloved hand pulls the lever down. All electricity is shut off. The lights go out instantly, and the music stops. Cellar. Boiler room. Professor Plum lights a small match. Mrs. Peacock, in the darkness, backs up into the boiler. She thinks it's a person and starts to hit it with her handbag.
Ah! Don't you touch me!
Plum shakes his hand in pain as the flame from the match reaches him. Second floor, master bedroom. A gust of wind blows in, shutting the door. Wadsworth yells in fright. Second floor, bedroom. The gust opens a nearby window. Mrs. White screams. Ground floor, staircase. Yvette is descending the stairs quietly. Mrs. White's scream can still be heard. Ground floor, library. The cop is on the phone.
Hello? Hello?
Ground floor, billiard room. Yvette enters quietly. A voice can be heard. It can't be identified, even as being male or female. The first line sounds male, the second, female. Shut the door. Did anyone recognize you? Suddenly, Yvette's French accent is gone.
They must have. And not just my face. They know every inch of my body, and they're not the only ones.
A noose flies onto Yvette's neck.
It's you!
Ground floor, library. The cop is still on the phone.
There's something funny going on around here. I don't know what it is.
We see the door handle being silently opened.
No, I'm not on duty, but I have a feeling that I'm in danger. You know that big, ugly house on top?
The lead pipe comes down softly on the phone's cradle, cutting the connection off. We can see the lead pipe being raised behind the cop's head.
Hello? Hello? Are you there?
Ground floor, the hall. The doorbell rings. Views of the guests and Wadsworth's faces, each of them in turn, all shocked. Ground floor, the hall. View outside. The front door opens. A young woman is outside. She is dressed in a uniform and strikes a pose as the door opens.
Da-da-da-da-da, I am your singing telegram.
The gun fires. She falls to the ground. The door slams shut. Attic, rear room. Mr. Green, trying to get out, opens a closet. Its contents fall on him. Second floor, bedroom. A jack-in-the-box springs open, next to Mrs. White. She screams. Second floor, master bedroom. Mrs. White's unintelligible yells can be heard.
I'm coming, I'm just trying to find the door.
Wadsworth enters another part of the master bedroom.
Coming.
Grasps the handle.
What's this? Another door?
He twists the handle, starting the shower. He is promptly soaked.
Ugh.
Ground floor, staircase. A very wet Wadsworth sloshes down the steps. He goes to the entrance to the cellar and pulls up the lever, restoring electricity to Hill House. Ground floor, the study. The record player starts again, taking several seconds to get up to speed. Ground floor, the hall. The party, minus Yvette, slowly reassembles in the hall. The record that has been playing comes to an end. Ground floor, the billiard room. The guests look into the room from the hall. They say Yvette's corpse sprawled on the pool table, still with a noose on her neck. The party simply looks at her with exhaustion and walks off. Ground floor, library. The guests look in from the hall and see the cop's corpse hung over a table.
2 murders.
Professor Plum enters the library and picks up the lead pipe.
Neither of them shot. I thought I heard a gun.
I did.
So did I.
I thought I heard the front door slam.
Oh God, the murderer must have run out.
The guests run toward the front door. Exterior, Hill House, porch. The guests open the door, seeing the singing telegram girl's body. It has a bullet hole neatly through the forehead.
3 murders.
6 altogether.
This is getting serious.
They close the door and lock it. Ground floor, the hall. The guests walk onto the main floor.
No gun. Yvette dropped it there. Very well, I know who did it.
You do?
And furthermore, I'm going to tell you all how it was done. Follow me.
Hello, dear listener. The following sequence involves many locale changes in quick succession. For your listening ease and my narrating ease, upcoming transitions will be narrated in a more conventional fashion. Wadsworth walks to the library. The guests follow.
In order to help you understand what happened, I shall take you through the events of the evening step by step. At the start of the evening, Yvette was here by herself, waiting to offer you all a glass of champagne. I was in the hall. I know because I was there. Then I hurried across to the kitchen.
Wadsworth is running into the kitchen. The guests following.
And the cook was in here, alive, sharpening knives, preparing for dinner, and then...
Wadsworth moves into the hall and springs up to the front door, the guests following closely.
And the doorbell rang, and it was you, Colonel.
Yes.
And I asked you for your coat, and I recognized you as Colonel Mustard, and I prevented you from telling your real name because I didn't want any of you to use any name other than your pseudonym, and I introduced myself to you as the butler, and I ran across the hall to the library.
He does so with the confused guests in tow.
And then Yvette met you, and smiled, and poured you a drink.
He runs into the hall toward the front door.
And the doorbell rang, and it was Mrs. White looking pale and tragic. I took her coat and made off.
Head for the library again.
And I introduced Mrs. White to Colonel Mustard. Hello, hello. And I saw that Mrs. White and Yvette flinched. And then there was a rumble of thunder and a crash of lightning. And to make a long story short...
Too late!
Too late!
One by one, you all arrived. And then the gong was struck by the cook.
Wadsworth moves to the hall and strikes the gong.
And then we went to the dining room.
They do so.
And Mrs. Peacock sat here, and Professor Plum sat there, and Mrs. White sat here, and Mr. Green, Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard, and this chair was vacant. Anyway, we all revealed that we all received a letter. And you had a letter, and you had a letter, and you had a letter, and you had a letter.
Get on with it!
The point is blackmail.
But all this came out after dinner in the study.
You're right.
Party runs across the hall to the study. The butler rushes around the room, pointing at different locations.
Mr. Green stood here, Mrs. Peacock here, and Miss Scarlet here, and Professor Plum here, and Colonel Mustard, and Mrs. White, and...
Get on with it!
I'm getting there. Mr. Body went to get his surprise packages from the hall, and you all opened your presents, and Mr. Body switched out the lights.
Wadsworth turns off the lights. Pause. Everyone screams.
Ah!
The lights are flipped back on. Wadsworth is lying on the floor, and the guests, tired of all this, react with disgust. The butler opens his eyes.
Mr. Body lay on the floor, apparently dead.
He was dead. I examined him.
Then why was he bashed in the head a few minutes later with a candlestick if he was dead already?
All right, I made a mistake.
Right, but if so, why was Mr. Body pretending to be dead? It could only be because he realized his scheme had misfired, and the gunshot was intended to kill him, not me. Look, the bullet grazed his ear. Clearly, his best way of escaping death was to pretend to be dead already.
So whoever grabbed the gun from me in the dark was trying to kill him.
But remember what happened next.
He goes to the door and picks up the glass from a table.
Mrs. Peacock took a drink, and Professor Plum said, maybe it's poisoned. She screams. Mr. Green.
Wadsworth slaps Peacock.
Well, I had to stop her from screaming. Then, more screaming. Yvette, the billiard room. We all rushed out.
As they do now, Wadsworth sits on the pool table and the guests pool around the door.
But one of us wasn't here. No.
No.
No. Maybe one of us was murdering the cook, who wasn't here with us.
Do you know?
I do. While we stood here trying to stop Yvette from panicking,
He leaves for the study.
one of us could have stayed in the study, picked up the dagger,
He picks up the dagger.
run down the hall,
He runs down the hall.
and stabbed the cook.
He enters the kitchen and plunges the dagger into a kitchen as the guests arrive at the door.
Oh, how could he risk it? We might have seen him running back.
Wadsworth goes over to the freezer and pushes open the back, exposing the kitchen/study secret passage.
Not if they used this secret passage, and the murderer ran back to the secret passage through the secret passage to the study.
Wadsworth leaves the kitchen for the hall and runs towards the study.
Is that where it comes out?
Yes, look.
Wadsworth pushes open the picture. They are now in the study.
What?
How did you know?
This house belongs to a friend of mine. I've known all along.
So you could be the murderer.
Don't be ridiculous. If I was the murderer, why would I reveal to you how I did it?
The guests nod.
Well, who else knew about the secret passage?
We found it. Colonel Mustard and me.
You found it. You could have known about it all the time.
But I didn't.
Well, why should we believe you?
Because she was with all of us in the billiard room doorway while Yvette was screaming. Don't you remember?
What I don't understand is, why was the cook murdered? She had nothing to do with Mr. Body.
Of course she did. I gathered you all here together because you were all implicated in Mr. Body's dastardly blackmail. Did none of you deduce that the others were involved too?
Evidently, no one had.
What about the others?
the cook, and Yvette?
No.
No.
That's how he got all his information. Before he could blackmail anyone, Mr. Body had to discover their guilty secret. The cook and Yvette were his accomplices.
I see. So whoever knew that the cook was involved killed her?
Yes.
Colonel Mustard looks very happy.
I know because I was Mr. Body's butler, that the cook had also worked for one of you.
The guests ask who it was.
Mrs. White, you recognized Yvette, didn't you? Don't deny it.
What do you mean by don't deny it? I'm not denying anything.
Another denial.
All right. It's true. I knew Yvette. My husband had an affair with her, but I didn't care. I wasn't jealous.
Miss Scarlet, you knew Yvette too, didn't you?
Yes, she worked for me.
You also knew her, Colonel Mustard. We've already established that you were one of Miss Scarlet's clients. That's why you were so desperate to get your hand on those negatives. Photographs of you and Yvette in flagrante delicto, remember?
Mr. Body threatened to send those pictures to my dear old mother. The shock would have killed her.
That would have been quite an achievement since you told me that she's dead already. So, he had the motive.
You all had a motive.
But where and when was Mr. Body killed?
Don't you see? Look, we came back to the study with Yvette. Mr. Body was on the floor.
Wadsworth grabs Mr. Green and throws him to the ground.
Pretending to be dead, but one of us noticed he's alive.
The butler hoists Mr. Green up and throws him into a chair.
So I explained that I was Mr. Body's butler and that I'd invited you here, and we realized that there was only one other person in the house, the cook.
The cook!
Everyone but Wadsworth runs out of the study, up the hall, into the kitchen. The guests enter, breathless. Mr. Green runs to the freezer, just like he did before. But there's no Wadsworth.
Well, where is he?
A freezer door opens. Miss Scarlet screams. Wadsworth, looking quite dead, falls into Mr. Green's arms. The exasperated Mr. Green drops the butler on the floor. Wadsworth opens his eyes.
By now she was dead. We laid her down with our backs to the freezer. One of us slipped out through the same secret passage.
Again?
Of course, back to the study.
They all run there.
The murderer was in the secret passage. Meanwhile, Mr. Body
Wadsworth again throws Mr. Green to the floor.
had been on the floor. He jumped up.
The butler picks up Mr. Green, then lets him fall again.
The murderer came out the secret passage panel, picked up the candlestick.
The butler acts as if he had the candlestick and pursues a frightened Mr. Green up the hall toward the bathroom.
Mr. Body followed us out of the study into the hall, looking for an escape. The murderer crept up behind him and killed him.
Wadsworth brings his hand down on Mr. Green's head. Mr. Green falls.
Will you stop that?
No.
The butler grabs Mr. Green and proceeds to the bathroom.
Then he threw him in the toilet.
No!
And nonchalantly rejoined us beside the cook's body in the kitchen. It took less than half a minute.
So who wasn't there the entire time in the kitchen?
Whoever it was the murderer.
He runs off. We can hear a toilet flush. The bathroom door opens and Mr. Green emerges, drying his hands. He hands the towel to Colonel Mustard. Wadsworth runs them into the study.
And we put the weapons in the cupboard, locked it, and ran to the front door.
He runs out, almost colliding with the just arrived guests. Wadsworth opens the front door and pantomimes throwing the key away.
To throw away the key, the motorist. I didn't throw away the key. I put it in my pocket, and someone could have taken it out of my pocket and substituted another.
We were all in the huddle. Any one of us could have done that.
Precisely.
He slams the front door.
Wait a minute. Colonel Mustard has a top secret Pentagon job. Mrs. White's husband is a nuclear physicist, and Yvette is a link between them.
What is your top secret job, Colonel?
I can tell you. He's working on the secret of the next fusion bomb.
How did you know that?
Colonel Mustard, can you keep a secret?
Yes.
So can I.
Is this a plot between them, Wadsworth, or did Colonel Mustard do it alone?
We shall see. Let's look at the other murders.
Yes. Bad luck that motorist arrived at that moment.
It wasn't luck. I invited him.
You did?
You did?
Of course. It's obvious. Everyone here tonight was either Mr. Body's victim or accomplice. Everyone who has died gave him vital information about one of you. I got them here so they'd give evidence against him and force him to confess.
Oh, yeah? What about that motorist? What kind of information did he have?
He was my driver during the war.
Colonel Mustard sits in a chair.
And what was he holding over you?
He knew that I was a war profiteer. I stole essential Air Force radio parts and sold them on the black market. That's how I made all of my money. But that does not make me a murderer.
Well, a lot of our airmen died because their radios didn't work. Was the policeman working for Mr. Body, too?
The cop was from Washington. He was on my payroll. I bribed him once a week so I could carry on with business. Mr. Body found out somehow.
Oh, my God.
Oh, please.
And the singing telegram girl?
They open the door and look at the girl's corpse.
She was my patient once. I had an affair with her. That's how I lost my license. Mr. Body found that out too.
Well, let's put her in the study with the others.
They take the most recent corpse to the study and drop it to the ground from shoulder height.
So, now you all know why they died. Whoever killed Mr. Body also wanted his accomplices dead.
How did the murderer know about them all? I mean, I admit that I had guessed that this young singer informed on me to Mr. Body, but I didn't know anything about any of you until this evening.
First, the murderer had to get the weapons. Easy. He stole the key from my pocket. Then we all followed Colonel Mustard's suggestion that we split up and search the house.
That's right. It was Colonel Mustard's suggestion.
And one of us got away from his or her partner and hurriedly got to the study. On the desk was the envelope from Mr. Body. It contained photographs and letters, evidence of Mr. Body's network of informants.
Where's the envelope now?
Gone. Destroyed.
Wadsworth looks around.
Perhaps in the fire, the only possible place.
He throws the grate aside and pulls out the remnants of the tape made earlier.
Aha! Then, having found out the whole story, the murderer went to the cupboard, unlocked it with the key, took out the wrench.
Then we found the secret passage from the conservatory to the lounge, where we found the motorist dead.
That's right. And we couldn't get in, so Yvette ran to open the cupboard, shut the door, bang, and the doorbell rang.
The doorbell rings. Everyone freezes in terror.
Oh, whoever it is, they gotta go away or they'll be killed.
Mrs. Peacock opens the front door. A rather elderly evangelist stands outside, pamphlets in hand.
Good evening. Have you ever given any thought to the kingdom of heaven?
What?
Repent! The kingdom of heaven is at hand.
You ain't just whistling Dixie.
Armageddon is almost upon us.
I've got news for you. It's already here.
Go away.
But your souls are in danger.
Our lives are in danger, you beatnik.
She shuts the door on him, closing several of his pamphlets inside.
The cop arrived next. We locked him in the library. We forgot the cupboard with the weapons was now unlocked. Then we split up again, and the murderer switched off the electricity.
He does so. Everything goes black.
Oh my god.
Not again.
Turn on the lights.
Wadsworth turns on the lights.
Sorry, didn't mean to frighten you.
You're a bit late for that! I hate it when he does that.
Then there were 3 more murders.
So which of us killed him?
None of us killed Mr. Body or the cook.
So who did?
The one person who wasn't with us, Yvette.
Yvette?
She was in the billiard room listening to our conversation. She heard the gunshot. She thought he was dead. And while we were all examining the bullet hole, she crept into the study, picked up the dagger, ran to the kitchen, and stabbed the cook. We couldn't hear the cook scream because Mrs. Peacock was screaming about the poisoned brandy. Then Yvette returned to the billiard room, she screamed, and we all ran to her.
Well, when did she kill Mr. Body?
When I said, we all ran to the kitchen to see the cook. Yvette hid in the study to check that Mr. Body was dead. He got up and followed them down the hall, so she hit him on the head with the candlestick and dragged him to the toilet.
Why?
To create confusion.
Well, it worked.
Why did she do it?
Was it because she was acting under orders from the person who killed her later?
Who?
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 Was it one of her clients? Or was it a jealous wife? Or an adulterous doctor? No. It was her employer, Miss Scarlet.
That's a lie.
Is it? You used her the way you would always used her. You killed the motorist when we split up to search the house.
How could I have known about the secret passage?
Easy. Yvette told you. So when we split up again, you switched off the electricity. It was easy for you here on the ground floor. Then, in the dark, you got the lead pipe and the rope, strangled Yvette, ran to the library, killed the cop, picked up the gun where Yvette dropped it, opened the front door, recognized the singing telegram girl from her photograph, and shot her.
You've no proof.
The gun is missing. Gentlemen, turn out your pockets. Ladies, empty your purses. Whoever has the gun is the murderer.
As they all begin to do so, Miss Scarlet quickly pulls out the revolver and points it at the guests.
Brilliantly worked out, Wadsworth. I congratulate you.
Me too.
Shut up.
Now, there's one thing I don't understand.
One thing.
Why did you do it? Half of Washington knows what kind of business you run. You are in no real danger. The whole town would be implicated if you were exposed.
I don't think they know my real business. My business is secrets. Yvette found them out for me. The secrets of Senator Peacock's Defense Committee, of Colonel Mustard's fusion bomb, Professor Plum's UN contacts, and the work of your husband, Mrs. White, the nuclear physicist.
So it is political. You're a communist.
No, Mr. Green. Communism is just a red herring. Like all members of the oldest profession, I'm a capitalist. And I'm gonna sell my secrets, your secrets, to the highest bidder.
And what if we don't cooperate?
You will, or I'll expose you.
We could expose you. 6 murders.
I hardly think it will enhance your reputation at the UN, Professor Plum, if it's revealed that you have been implicated not only in adultery with one of your patients, but in her death and the deaths of 5 other people.
You don't know what kind of people they have in the UN. I might go up in their estimation.
Colonel Mustard starts toward Miss Scarlet. She points the revolver at him.
It's no good blackmailing me, madame. I have no more money.
The guests agree, claiming the same thing.
Really?
I know, sweetie pie, but you can pay me in government information. All of you.
She pauses, then walks to Wadsworth and points the revolver at him.
Except you, Wadsworth. You, as a mere butler, have no access to government secrets. So I'm afraid your moment has come.
Not so fast, Miss Scarlet. I do have a secret or two.
Oh yeah? Such as?
The game's up, Scarlet. There are no more bullets left in that gun.
Oh, come on. You don't think I'm gonna fall for that old trick?
It's not a trick. There was 1 shot at Mr. Body in the study, 2 for the chandelier, 2 at the lounge door, and 1 for the singing telegram.
That's not 6.
1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1.
There was only 1 shot that got the chandelier. That's 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2.
Even if you are right, it would be 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1, not 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1.
Okay, fine. 1 plus 2 plus 1. Shut up! Point is, there's 1 bullet left in this gun, and guess who's going to get it?
The doorbell rings. Scarlet is distracted by it just long enough for Wadsworth to disarm her and force her to the ground. Mr. Green runs for the door and opens it. Cops pour in as the guests put their hands up.
I'm only a guest.
Where's the chief?
The elderly evangelist, now revealed to be the police chief, walks in.
Wadsworth, well done. I did warn you, Miss Scarlet. Mr. Hoover is an expert on Armageddon.
Scarlet is pulled to her feet.
Wadsworth, don't hate me for trying to shoot you.
Frankly, Scarlet, I don't give a damn. As I was trying to tell you, there are no bullets left in this gun, you see?
He pulls the trigger, firing the 6th bullet through the rope of a 2nd chandelier. Wadsworth is perplexed. Scarlet shrugs, embarrassed.
1 plus 2 plus 1.
Colonel Mustard, equally perplexed, counts on his fingers.
Plus 2 plus 1 is...
The chandelier falls and shatters on the floor, directly behind Colonel Mustard. That's what could have happened. But how about this? Ground floor, the hall. We return to the party in the middle of Wadsworth's explanation of the evening's events. Wadsworth turns on the lights.
In the dark, the murderer ran across the hall to the study, picked up the rope and the lead pipe, ran to the billiard room, strangled Yvette.
He demonstrates on Mr. White.
Ran to the library, hit the cop on the head with the lead pipe, then coming out of the library, the doorbell rang. It was the singing telegram. The murderer picked up the gun where Yvette dropped it, ran to the door, opened it, recognized the girl from her photograph, shot her, and ran back to the cellar.
The cellar!
Yes.
But I wasn't in the cell.
No, but you were, Mrs. Peacock. You murdered them all. You were the person who was missing when the cook and Mr. Body were murdered, and the cook used to be your cook. Don't you remember your fatal mistake? You told us at dinner that you were eating one of your favorite recipes, and monkey's brains, though popular in Cantonese cuisine, are not often to be found in Washington, D.C.
Is that what we ate?
He covers his mouth and runs for the bathroom.
And why would I have murdered all the others?
Obviously, in case Mr. Body had told them about you.
So it has nothing to do at all with the disappearing nuclear physicist and Colonel Mustard's work on the new fusion bomb.
No, communism was a red herring. Mrs. Peacock did it all.
There's no proof.
Well, the gun is missing. Gentlemen, turn out your pockets. Ladies, empty your purses. Whoever has the gun is the murderer.
Mrs. Peacock opens her purse and pulls out the gun, pointing it at the butler.
Very well. What do you propose to do about it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing at all. I don't approve of murder, but it seems to me that you've done the world of service by ridding it of an appalling blackmailer and his disgusting informers.
But the police will be here any minute. What happens then?
Why should the police come? Nobody's called them.
You mean?
That's right. Now I suggest that we stack the bodies in the cellar, lock it, leave quietly one at a time, and pretend that none of this has ever happened.
A great idea. I'll leave first if you don't mind.
Mrs. Peacock uses the gun to wave the other guests into a group.
Be my guest. In fact, I think we all owe you a vote of thanks. For she's a jolly good fellow, for she's a jolly good fellow, for she's a jolly good fellow, which
Nobody can deny.
We need singing lessons.
As we stated before, multi-part harmony, bad idea over voice chat. Mrs. Peacock carefully slips out the door. As soon as the door shuts, the party stops singing and lets out sighs of relief.
I told you I didn't do it.
But what if the authorities find out what happened?
Oh, the FBI will take care of that.
You mean?
My phone call from Mr. Hoover? I work for him, of course. How else could I have known all about you, all those different things?
There's still one thing I don't understand.
One thing?
Who was Mrs. Peacock taking bribes from?
A foreign power. Her husband, the senator, has influence over defense contracts.
Is there going to be a cover-up?
Isn't that in the public interest? What could be gained by exposure?
But is the FBI in the habit of cleaning up after multiple murder?
Yes. Why do you think it's run by a man called Hoover?
Exterior, Hill House, driveway. Mrs. Peacock has her keys out and is approaching her car. The elderly evangelist steps out onto the driveway.
Oh, Mrs. Peacock.
How did you know my name?
The kingdom of heaven is at hand.
He whips out a gun and points it at her. Floodlights engage and cops pour out of the yard.
Okay, take her away.
Take your hands off of me. I'm a senator's wife.
The front door opens. The guests, led by Wadsworth, run out onto the porch.
Wadsworth, we got her.
You see? Like the Mounties, we always get our man.
Mrs. Peacock was a man?
Colonel Mustard slaps him, then Wadsworth does the same. Mrs. White twangs Mustard's suspenders.
Well, would anyone care for fruit or dessert?
Hold on, but here's what really happened. Ground floor, the hall. We return once more to Wadsworth's explanation of the evening's events. Wadsworth turns on the lights.
Sorry, didn't mean to frighten anyone.
You're a bit late for that!
Then there were 3 more murders.
So who did it?
Let's consider each murder one by one. Professor Plum, you knew that Mr. Body was still alive. Even psychiatrists can tell the difference between patients who are alive or dead. You fired the gun at him in the darkened mists, so you pretended he was dead. That's how you were able to kill him later unobserved.
That's right. He was the missing person in the kitchen after we found the cook dead.
But he was with us in the billiard room when we found Yvette screaming. If that's when the cook was killed, how did he do it?
I didn't.
You don't expect us to believe that, do you?
I expect you to believe it, Miss Peacock. You killed the cook. She used to be your cook, and she informed on you to Mr. Body.
Ground floor, dining room. Wadsworth enters. The guests stay around the door from the hall.
You made one fatal mistake. Sitting here at dinner, Mrs. Peacock told us that she was eating one of her favorite recipes, and monkey's brains, though popular in Cantonese cuisine, are not often to be found in Washington, D.C.
Ground floor, the hall. The party re-enters the hall from the dining room.
Colonel Mustard, when we saw the motorist at the front door, you took the key to the weapons cupboard out of my pocket. Then you suggested that we all split up. You separated from Miss Scarlet, crossed the hall, opened the cupboard, took the wrench, ran to the conservatory, entered the lounge through the secret passage, killed the motorist with a blow on the head, like that.
This is incredible!
Not so incredible as what happened next.
He starts up the stairs.
After we all split up again, I went upstairs with you. Yes, you, Mrs. White.
The butler stops on the landing.
And while I was in the master bedroom, you hurried downstairs and turned off the electricity, got the rope from the cupboard, and throttled Yvette. You were jealous that her husband was stopping Yvette. That's why you killed him, too.
Yes. Yes, I did it. I killed Yvette. I hated her so much. It's flames on the side of my face. Breathing, heavy breaths, heaving
While you were in the
breaths.
billiard room, Miss Scarlet seized the opportunity and, under the cover of darkness, got to the library where she hit the cop whom she'd been bribing on the head with the lead pipe. True or false?
True. Who are you, Perry Mason?
So it must have been Mr. Green who shot the singing telegram.
I didn't do it.
Well, there's nobody else left.
But I didn't do it. The gun is missing. Whoever's got the gun shot the girl.
Wadsworth pulls the gun from his pocket.
I shot her.
You?
So it was you. I was going to expose you.
I know, so I choose to expose myself.
Please, there are ladies present.
You thought Mr. Body was dead. But why? None of you even met him until tonight.
You're Mr. Body.
Wait a minute. So who did I kill?
My butler.
Oh, shucks.
He was expendable, like all of you. I'm grateful to you all for disposing of my network of spies and informers. Saved me a lot of trouble. Now there's no evidence against me.
This all has nothing to do with my disappearing nuclear physicist husband or Colonel Mustard's work with the new top secret fusion bomb?
No, communism was just a red herring.
Wadsworth runs to the front door, keeping the revolver pointed at the party.
But the police will be here any minute. You'll never get away with this, any of you.
Why should the police come? Nobody's called them.
You mean? Oh my god, of course!
So, why shouldn't we get away with it? We'll stack the bodies in the cellar, lock it, leave quietly one at a time, and forget that any of this ever happened.
Mr. Green takes off his glasses and starts to put them in his jacket's inside pocket.
And you'll just go on blackmailing us all.
Of course. Why not?
Well, I'll tell you why not.
He pulls a pistol from his jacket and fires. Wadsworth tries to get a shot off, but is too slow. The butler, well, ex-butler, is hit.
Ooh. Ah. Oh. Good shot, Green.
Wadsworth leans against the floor and wall and slides to the floor. He looks at the blood flowing out of his chest.
Oh. Very good.
The man we formerly knew as Wadsworth dies. Mr. Green lowers the pistol, still without his glasses, looking more confident than he has all night. Mrs. White steps up to him. He points the pistol at her.
Are you a cop?
No, I'm a plant.
A plant. I thought men like you were usually called a fruit.
Very funny.
He pulls out a badge.
FBI, that phone call from J. Edgar Hoover was for me.
He goes to the front door and grabs the handle.
I told you, I didn't do it.
He opens the front door and cops pour in. The elderly evangelist, the chief, follows them in.
All right. Who done it?
The guests all try to explain, blaming each other. Mr. Green
Someone-
shouts,
Oh, you see, it was...
Up. They all did it. But if you want to know who killed Mr. Body, I did. In the hall, with the revolver. Okay, Chief, take him away. I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
Mr. Green turns to leave, grinning at the chief. Closing credits start to roll to the tune of Shake, Rattle, and Roll. The end. This has been our performance of the Clue movie. We hope you have enjoyed it here today. Our cast: Wadsworth, or Mr. Body in one ending, Joel Guttman, Colonel Mustard, Sean Robert, Green, Cam Griffin, Professor Plum, Peter English, Scarlet, Frangi, Peacock, Kailey Reyes, White, Mary Rivette, Yvette and the Motorist, Abraham E. Rebollo, Mr. Body, the Evangelist, and the Police Chief, Taylor Starnes, and the Cop, Cory Blauser. We hope you've had an excellent evening here tonight, and that you will join us again when the next of these comes around. Until then, farewell.
Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us across social media for updates. Thanks for watching!